So, what if I told you that for the last 300 years, the UK has been locked in a constant, relentless battle with debt? Today, we're going to uncover a story that's hidden deep inside the numbers, a history that's way less about spreadsheets and, a lot more about soldiers, massive protests, and the actual price of democracy. Okay, to really get us started, I want to kick things off with a question. Just think about it for a sec. For how many of the last 300 years has the UK government actually been in debt? Go on, take a guess. 50 years? 100? Maybe even 200?
Well, the answer is pretty staggering. All of them. Every single one. For over 3 centuries, the UK government has been carrying debt. This is not some recent problem, right? It's a foundational financial reality that has shaped the nation for generations.
So you gotta ask, what on earth fueled this constant, never-ending debt? Well, for a huge chunk of this history, the answer is remarkably simple and consistent. War. The massive costs of conflict and maintaining a global empire were, by far, the main drivers. Just let that sink in for a moment. For over 150 years, the government's entire budget basically had 2 jobs: paying for the war that was happening right now, or paying off the massive IOUs from all the wars that came before. That's it. Now, to really get our heads around the sheer scale of this, we need to understand one key term: the debt-to-GDP ratio. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. It's just a super powerful tool that compares what a country owes to what its entire economy produces in a single year. And by 1856, after centuries of conflict, kind of capped off by the Crimean War, the UK's debt-to-GDP ratio hit an absolutely astonishing 100%. Imagine that for a second. The national debt was equal to the value of everything the country produced and earned in an entire year. And here is the absolutely crucial part. While people were paying taxes, they got almost nothing we would recognize today as public services. No national health service, no state pensions, no social security. Nothing. Their money wasn't for them. It was for funding the armed forces and paying the interest on past wars. Basically, it was the cost of policing the empire.
But then, just as the debt hit this incredible peak, something really remarkable happened. A period of intense and incredibly successful debt repayment began. It created what you could almost call a golden age of fiscal responsibility.
So, for 44 years, from 1856 all the way to 1900, the UK government did the unthinkable. It actually successfully paid down its massive public debt. A 150-year trend was completely turned on its head. So how in the world did they pull it off? Well, their formula for success wasn't austerity, not like we think of it today. It was this really interesting 3-step process. First, they invested in the economy, public works, new regulations. Second, they brought in fairer taxes, like the income tax. And third, and this was absolutely the most crucial step of all, they stayed out of major, ruinously expensive wars. And the results? They were absolutely astonishing. In just 44 years, that debt-to-GDP ratio plummeted from over 100% all the way down to just 34%. It was an incredible financial turnaround, but it was fragile. And all that fragile success was completely shattered by the next major conflict. And when that war came, it threw a really harsh spotlight on a vital question. Who is really profiting from war and empire, and who is being left to foot the bill?
The Second Boer War cost a staggering £140 million. That's more than the government's entire income for a year back then. So in one single conflict, nearly half a century of painstaking debt reduction was just wiped out, gone. And the nation was plunged right back into heavy debt.
This really forces us to look at the empire's balance sheet, According to the source material, the benefits, they flowed overwhelmingly to the British elite, the investors, the merchants. But the costs, they were carried by colonized populations, by soldiers and their families, and by the British working class who had to pay all the taxes.
And if we zoom in on the Boer War specifically, the picture gets even sharper. The primary financial winners were the so-called landlords. These were the mining magnates who controlled South Africa's gold fields, and, of course, their financial backers. And the losers? Well, that was the general UK population, who are now saddled with this enormous new debt. Now, the people paying this price had virtually no say in any of it. At the start of the 19th century, voting was a privilege that was reserved for just a tiny fraction of wealthy men. And this huge disconnect between who paid for the wars and who decided to wage them, it fueled widespread public anger.
And that anger, it didn't stay quiet. It spilled out onto the streets.
Throughout the 19th century, ordinary people pushed back, hard. Events like the Peterloo Massacre and huge movements like the Chartists. These weren't just riots. They were organized, passionate demands for representation. People were just tired of paying the price and being silenced.
And you know what? All that pressure, it actually worked. The Great Reform Acts of 1832 and 1867 dramatically expanded the number of men who could vote. This wasn't some gift that was handed down from the elite. It was won. It was won through decades of sustained public demand for a voice.
So after all that, what is the ultimate takeaway from this 300-year saga of debt and war and protest? Why does this hidden history, buried in old government balance sheets, why does it matter to us right now, today? Well, it all really comes down to this. The fight for economic fairness and the fight for political representation, they were never separate struggles. They were two sides of the exact same coin. People demanded a say because they were tired of paying the price for decisions they never, ever got to make.
Which leaves us with the final question to think about. This history shows us this deep, really unbreakable link between national debt, the decision to go to war, and the fight for political power. So, what can this 300-year story teach us about the challenges that we're all facing right now?